Creating the experience. We have seen in the previous articles some strange property of presence is responsible for the birth of the self. By property, I mean its ability to be either as a static witness or just as existence. When it assumes the form of a witness, it experiences itself as self. Otherwise, it remains as experiencing. It means it can become two while being only one. Quite paradoxical. The two being the experience and experiencer, but it does not stop there. It wants to become many. We now explore this even stranger aspect of presence, which is experiencing. It's not merely a random process of modulations happening in the presence, it has some interesting properties. Not only does experiencing form impressions on the presence, it also self organizes itself in the form of various structures. I would be it would be equivalent to say that the presence self organizes itself, or in other words, it creates. The structures thus created are the creation. Change, the mysterious illusory force. It is our direct experience that experiencing is not static. There is change. In fact, if there were no change, there wouldn't be any experience at all. So, in my view, change is synonymous with experience. When you experience, all you perceive is change. Change is as fundamental as presence. How is it possible that any change or activity or modulations even happen in something that is empty, nothingness? I have no answer for that. The best answer I could find was that change is an unknowable. It cannot be reduced to anything else. Mind cannot find any explanation or cause for it. Change is, and that's all we can say about it. We encounter a paradox here. Self is essentially changeless. It is nothingness, and nothingness cannot change. Can it? Still, we experience change. How is that even possible? It is beyond the grasping power of mind, at least for me. The only way that can happen is when you consider change as being unreal. Unreal meaning it is, but it is not. Just as there are images in the mirror, but it is just a static mirror. Images are illusion, they are not really in mirror. In other words, all change in an illusion is not really there. This is traditionally called Maya. It is also called Prakriti in Sankhya, Shakti in Shaivism, Kundalini in Hatha Yoga, or energy of consciousness, or just energy in New Ageism. Perhaps there are many more names in all world philosophies. Behind all those fancy names is our simple friend change. It is very much here, present now in our everyday experience. Do not make the newbie mistake of thinking it is something magical and far out there thing. It's ordinary and very, very mysterious at the same time. Considering that change is elusive, it is quite something. All that is manifested, all universes, past, present, and future, everything that is a thing is because of change. It's the most powerful thing, most interesting thing in entire presence. It's the only thing that we can experience simply because it enables experience. In physical world, we experience change in many forms like motion, light, energy, work, forces, fields, etc. Matter is just changing nothingness. In mental world, change is all mental process, thoughts, memories, imaginations, perceptions, emotions, etc. All nothing but non-physical changes in nothingness. Change is the metaphysical mother of time, both subjective and objective time. Who would have thought nothingness could be so interesting? Anyhow, once you let go of the question why there is change, you can take the next step and find out its implications, its effects, and how of it all. A change sets up a series of changes. There is never just one event. There is always a propagation of events that continues infinitely. There is our direct observation. The train of changes occur in infinitely possible varieties. This is by necessity. Some trains of changes eventually form repeating chains, cyclic events. They have a lower entropy than mere random changes. Such chain of change are being called a process. In this block, obviously, processes are infinite in number and extent, but the most interesting ones are those we can know. Rest are unknowable and hence boring, at least for me. The fundamental process, the process that is responsible for all the organization that is happening, will be called the fundamental process. What it does is creates information out of pure randomness. In other words, it reduces the entropy. It favors complexity and organization to chaos and randomness. Why does it do that? It doesn't do anything really. The process happens by necessity. Anything that is organized prevails compared to the randomness, the later result in no experiencing. The fundamental process feeds on itself, meaning any structure that are capable of creating more structures or augmenting themselves are favored. Obviously, this is also by necessity. The structures that do not recreate or repair tend to get destroyed or do not progress further in complexity. Thus, the organizing or structuring is a natural outcome of experiencing. No one or no thing is doing it. There is no intention or will or cause for it. It happens because that is what must happen. It seems there is an opposite process that's going on in parallel, the process of destroying the structures or an automatic increase in entropy. Everything that arises falls sooner or later. There is impermanence. If you see it closely, the fundamental process is experiencing itself, seen as a creative process from a biased or selective perspective. We chose to see it as self organizing when actually there is not much happening. It, it's all perpetual experiencing, perpetual impermanence because the experiencing cannot stop. Else, it won't remain experiencing. It becomes pure presence once it stops. The structures rise and fall on their own, and when they rise, we can choose to see them as arisen because of the fundamental process. One metaphor to understand the fundamental process is that of tiny whirlpools that form on the surface of running water as impermanent structures. When seen broadly, there is nothing but water flowing downhill. The energy in the water sometimes make its parts flow in opposite or circular way. There is no creation as such. The whirlpools are structures with a lower entropy compared to the water surrounding them, and so selectively appear to be formed by some process. They don't last, but the flow never ceases. Since the structures are a result of fundamental process, which is a process meaning a series of changes, the structures are essentially a change. They are not static, they are impermanent by necessity. It's change after all, so they arise and then something else arises, destroying the old, creating the new. Now you know why everything in this creation is called false, mithya, and why it never lasts. Change, by definition, cannot remain static. Nothing lasts, and since change is illusory, it's not really there. The structures are illusory too. This realization alone has the power to liberate you from the immense suffering that is caused when you try to hold on every changing phenomenal stuff, people, relations, objects, bodies, minds, knowledge, and all that. Everything gets destroyed in this sea of change. The only thing that never changes and is eternal is self, the real you. An example of the fundamental process is the process of speciation via natural selection. It is a tiny aspect of the fundamental process from the evolution of the DNA molecules to the complex life form. It is just the fundamental process acting on the physical world and creating structures. Another example is emergence of human personality via mutual interaction of mind and environment, people, societies, ego, etc. We, as we appear in the physical world, are nothing but one structure organized by this process and impermanent, sadly. The fundamental process is responsible for creation of the mind, brain, body, the world, universe, and everything else that can be experienced objectively. These are just structures. The inherent necessity in some structures puts constraints on them and they evolves algorithmically that explain the mathematical conformity of physical universe. Physical universe is a structure that is rule based, algorithmic, and probabilistic is statistical and is so very predictable except at tiny scale when statistical rules break down and it again appear as the presence sort of indicates it. It is debatable if there are other meaningful non physical structures or other universes or even stranger things like disembodied minds. Nothing in the fundamental process prevents them from existing. However, if it is not your experience, then they are as good as non existent. Explore the possibilities, they are infinite. The stream of human knowledge is heading towards a non mechanical reality. The universe begins to look more like a great thought than a great machine. Mind no longer appeared to be an accidental intrude into the realm of matter. We are beginning to suspect that we ought rather to hail it as the creator and governor of this realm. Sir James Jeans, The Mysterious Universe, 1930, page number 137. The mind as a collection of content. As we saw earlier, contents appear in the experience. These are then structured in the form of knowledge. It is an organized form of experiences. No experience means no knowledge. Knowledge pieces that fit together give rise to understanding yet another structure. Impressions from memory, one more strange thing for you to ponder. It has a temporal quality. The self organizing process even further and gives rise to a mega structure called the mind, which is a collection of content and organizing process. A good analogy is a computer having data, memory, and program to process, organize, use the data. As a fractal clone of the fundamental process, knowledge feeds on itself. That is, more knowledge leads to even more knowledge and stronger processes in order to organize it even further. For example, the knowledge of logic and rational thinking leads to a better structure of the existing knowledge and also empowers one to gain more knowledge. The knowledge of mathematics adds in better understanding of physics. Knowledge of human behavior leads to better relations, and so on. The mind is truly a great gift. In my experience, there is nothing as complex, marvelous, and beautiful as the mind. It is vast and it is very useful. If you are on the path of knowledge, you are mostly concerned with mind and its working. Without mind, there is no knowledge, no understanding, no exchange of knowledge. It is great, but it has limitations. It can be easily seen, experienced, so it is an object. After all, it's a product of fundamental process. As an object, it is impermanent. It lasts for only for a little while, so it becomes even more important to make full use of it. Since knowledge is a form of impurity and the mind is full of it, the mind itself can become a wheel of the self. The self hides behind the mind and assumes it is mind. Well, that's the bad news. The good news is that if trained and developed properly, it is the mind that takes you back to the self. It has the ability to reveal the self in all its glory. Once you are back, the mind becomes a wonderful vehicle for experiencing. Beyond mind, universal mind, and human mind. My definition to the word knowledge is a structure formed when experiences are organized automatically. What organizes the experiences? It's a part of consciousness I chose to call mind. It is huge, creator of everything, still a tiny part of consciousness. How does organization happen? By the agency of auto process such as evolution. Example, winds carving a mountain into a particular shape. Universe evolving out of just a soap of atoms. I call that process the fundamental process. Why are there any auto processes? Because there is a change. Change is fundamental. We can directly experience it. Nothing is static. Once there is a change, things start emerging. Some change organizes itself by feeding on itself. This forms structures. It is also directly experienced itself. It's not a theory. That was a brief summary of mind and what lies beyond it. To avoid the confusion between mind and human mind, I use the prefix universal sometimes. So, mind equals to universal mind, and mind equals to human mind. We will now see how they are related. Universal mind has all the knowledge. Why? Because it has experienced what can be experienced. It has organized it all. However, it may still get new experiences because experiencing never stops. It may get trillions of new experiences every moment. This is a universal learning process. So it keeps learning, gaining new knowledge. That knowledge is learnable kind, the known unknown. It gets the experience and convert the unknown to known. It goes on forever. All that is manifested, including as the human, is nothing but mind. So, why do I say that some things are unknowable even for the universal mind? Because The mind can only know what gets organized. What remains is unknowable. Mind gets only an interpretation of things that got organized automatically, not the thing itself. Some things may be impossible to experience, and so the mind will never know them, which means even the mind has some ignorance. Only pure consciousness has access to everything, it is absolute. Traditionally, the universal mind has been personified and iconized in many ways. Ishvara in Yoga or Sankhya, Brahma in Vedas, Devi, Mother in Shaivism, and perhaps a few names in Western philosophies. It's the creator because knowledge is essentially creation, structures in consciousness. What we know manifests, what we don't remain unseen. The discovery of universal mind as all powerful creator fund a variety of religions and practice that focused on pleasing it for worldly gain and even for knowledge and liberation. It can be possible, and worship of creators or creators is all about that. It took a personalized form, got anthropomorphized. Do not make this newbie mistake. Mind is not a super person that just sits there to fulfill your wishes and whims, nor does it japs you with bolts if you make mistakes. It is essentially us, since we are essentially self, and mind is nothing but a manifested self. We humans get a little slice of mind because we are a limited expression of consciousness for the time being. We are a tiny part of creation, a tiny, whiny structure that lasts for a few eye blinks, but we are essentially the same as whole, a fractal clone, if you will. So, we as an individual experience an individual mind and have access to its ground, the pure consciousness. After all, we are made out of consciousness. The structures that we call I, myself, body, brain, mind, a collection of memories and processes like thoughts, emotions, and all that is a product of evolutionary change. In other words, we are just part of mind. It's a special and complex structure because we express consciousness actively. We have ability to say I am consciousness. As a fractal clone of mind, our mind also organizes experiences, and we call those structures human knowledge. So, for example, we know via sensory perception and also via non sensory perception, memories, logic, imagination, thoughts, ideas, etc., are non sensory perceptions. This is learned knowledge. We constantly learn and convert the unknown into known, however, in a very limited way. What happens when we learn about the universal mind and consciousness? Magic happens. Now we can ask questions and answers that are already a part of universal mind starts appearing as the layers of ignorance that limits us into a human only mode starts disappearing. We get more and more of the knowledge directly. All knowledge falls on our feet. However, there still remains unknowns and unknowables. Mind has those limitations, and mind is even more limited. My own knowledge and experience ends here, but we can speculate a bit. What will happen when all most of ignorance is destroyed by this slow process of gaining more and more knowledge? One thing we can predict is that human mind will gain all access to mind. It will become mind that is already there. We become the ultimate creator. It's not a new creator. We just dissolve boundaries of our limitations and access the vastness of creation, a product of fundamental process. So we know all there is that's knowable. What happens when we hit the wall in the seeming infinite mind too? We emerge out of it and see ourselves as pure consciousness. Here it is meaningless to use the term we and I. It's all one. Consciousness sees itself as consciousness. This can be called ultimate liberation. Traditionally, it's called Atma merging with Paramatma, Vedic view, or achieving Buddhahood in Buddhism, or literally, Buddhi means mind, Buddha means beyond mind. Human mind versus brain. The self organization is also responsible for the formation of the brain, the body that hosts the brain, and a physical world that hosts the body. Well, very odd claim this one, isn't it? In reverse, physical world, body, brain, mind, consciousness, self. It's a good question and an important question. The short answer is it doesn't matter how you see it, it's all one. The processes in physical world leading to the presence are same as the ones leading to the physical world starting from the presence. It's none other than our old friend, the fundamental process. Our point of view decides the casual direction. The direction is not one sided, it is only our perspective that defines the direction. For now, I have decided to start from the presence. As we have discussed before, that is the only place where one can start from. Start from where you are, the solid ground of the self, the most certain of all experiences.